Good morning. Good morning. Let's talk about action research. Let me pull up here. Okay, here we go. All right, action research, module 14. What exactly is action research? As you'll learn here, action research does not fall under either qualitative or quantitative. This is going to depend on really what the needs are. This is more practitioner-focused methodology. A sort of frontline people that are trying to solve problems on the fly are more likely to use research. Doesn't have to be it generally a lot of times is teachers. Doesn't have to be teachers, could be counselors, could be social workers, any people that are really in the front lines trying to solve problems for students or clients. Okay, so what is the definition of action research? This is a systematic inquiry conducted by teachers, principals, counselors, stakeholders, and teaching learning environments, or even service learning environments. Okay, the purpose is to provide teachers or practitioners, researchers with a method to solve problems in schools to improve student learning and teacher effectiveness. And again, it doesn't have to be only focused on teachers. It could be focused on practitioners in general. Okay, the goal is to gain insight, develop reflective practice. And what does reflective practice means? Reflective practice means that you're a practitioner, you're maybe perhaps teaching or doing some sort of service-oriented activity, and you want to every once in a while reflect, how am I doing? Am I doing well? How can I improve? That concept of continuous improvement in your practice is a good concept to enact, because it truly keeps you active and learning and trying to improve upon your craft. And then you have the effective positive change in the school environment is another goal, and then also ultimately improving student or client outcomes. Some examples: here's a high school teacher that's confronted with the challenges of students that may be unmotivated and doesn't know, is it my teaching, or are they just naturally unmotivated? I don't know. This may be perhaps might want to do some action research to understand, how do you actually motivate students? How do you motivate different types of students? And it also empowers teachers to try different strategies and collect data such as test scores, those type of things. Okay, why action research? Students, teachers, or even practitioners don't generally find research persuasive or authoritative. Generally, researchers speak in a language that is not accessible by teachers. And not only that, being able to apply the findings of researchers is generally, there's like a level in between. The researchers do research, and generally that's not always applicable in a real life setting, based on the way it's designed, the problems that are addressed. And so a lot of times it's hard for teachers to find relevant, persuasive, authoritative research, such as the one that we just talked about, the issue of how do you motivate students. Okay, research also hasn't been relative to practice for a while. There's once again a disconnect. It doesn't address the questions that teachers have on a day-to-day basis. Findings in research have not really been expressed in ways that are comprehensible to teachers and understandable, and really more than anything, how teachers are able to take research and apply it to improve their craft. And then also, lastly, the education itself is unable to change. Conversely, therefore, it's unstable and susceptible to fads. Sorry, I can't pronounce that word this morning. I need some more coffee. Susceptible. There you go. Okay. And really what this means is, even if you go off and you get your doctorate, a lot of times you're even a master's, you're researching things that sometimes are far and away from the actual practice and what you're going to need to be able to become a better practitioner. It's rare that people do that. And so this is really what we're talking about, and why it's important to study action research is something that we may want to apply if we want to be successful and growing practitioners. Okay, key characteristics Again, this is just a review of what we just talked about. It's persuasive and authoritative, especially if teachers are doing it themselves to improve their craft, right? It's relevant, right? It's relevant because it's the issue that is the most important issue of the day, such as, again, the issue that I brought up with unmotivated students. It's accessible, right? It's not sitting in some journal. It hasn't taken 2 years to be approved by a journal. This is really may not even be published, but it's really something that teachers have in front of them, that they've created it, they designed it, and they're using it to solve their everyday problems. There's also a challenge to the intractability of reform in the education system, and it's really not a fad either, right? We're not going to be studying a fad. We want to study real live issues. Okay. Persuasive and authoritative teachers, they collect persuasive data. They know what data to collect. They have access to the data, and especially if it's their data or data that they have access to, it's not something that you have to go through IRB to get it approved to use that data, because again, you're not publishing this research. You're using that data for the purposes of improving your everyday craft. Identifying data sources that provide persuasive insight into the impact of intervention programs, student outcomes. Also, you develop solutions for the problems, and teachers are really authorities that, in the works in their classroom. They know their teachers, their students best. They know the problems that they're confronting best than anybody else. Okay, it's relevant. This is once again one of the most highly raised concerns by teachers year in and year out for maybe the last 40 or 50 years, when educational research has really taken off. A lot of times, research is conducted by university researchers. Rarely, a lot of times, many of them rarely step foot inside the classroom or inside a school. They're conducting their research in the university setting. And so thereby, you're going to always get that disconnect. The classrooms are characterized by uncertainty, and that you never know who might disrupt the classroom or what might disrupt student outcomes. And therefore, you have access to real live frontline issues. It also aims to increase certainty by creating predictability. Okay, it's accessible, right? It addresses concerns that are, frontline issues, everyday issues, things that traditional research doesn't really look at. Traditional research is looking at issues from a more of a macro perspective, where action research is looking at issues from a micro perspective. Okay. Also, teachers generally don't have access to traditional research. They don't have sometimes the money to buy access into the journals, university libraries. They may not have access to those. And so therefore, even when the research exists, they're not able to access it. Okay. Challenging the intractability of reform in the system. There's a lack of connection between research and practice. I've been in education for about 25 years. There always has been that disconnect. And never has somebody said that this is something that we need to solve. Almost like the research world and the practice world exist in their own separate and individual domains. The education system lacks goals and guiding principles. There's no central authority to settle disputes, and there's generally a bombardment of new fads and different things, different policies, different books, different programs for a school setting, and therefore it's really hard to know which one works best for my students in my setting a lot of the time. Action research gives teachers the opportunity to embrace problem-solving philosophies, making research and change part of their culture and change. This goes to that concept that I talked about earlier of continuous improvement. You want to be the type of practitioner that looks at your craft of how can I always get better? How can I get better each and every day? And how can I use research to help me get better each and every day? Okay, not a fad. Teachers are always going to always looked systematically and reflected on their practice to get better. Again, the concept of continuous improvement, even though they always didn't call it action research. Now it's under sort of the umbrella of action research because we're doing a little bit more research on it, creating the methodologies and the steps to be able to bring this to frontline practitioners so that they're able to apply and improve their craft and thus improve the education system. Okay, two types of action research, and these are sort of not complementary, maybe a lot of times in conflict with one another. The first is critical action research based on critical theory. You've probably heard of like critical race theory. That falls under sort of the umbrella of critical theory in many ways. And then you have also practical action research that emphasizes how to do something, how to improve upon something in frontline application. So let's talk about both of these. Okay, critical action research. The goal is to liberate individuals from through knowledge gathering. It's really about being democratic in your practice, equitable. Having the goal of liberation, as though education in some ways not liberating, enhancing people's full human potential. And sort of the criticism of this type of action research is that when you're focused so much on liberation, rarely or you don't have enough sort of focus on practical results and practical application. Thus comes around practical action research, which is really less about liberation, much more about application, less about thinking, more about improving the process. So this is really action oriented in every ways and means. And this is also, once again, in contrast to critical action research. Okay, levels of action research that you may implement. You may implement it at a district level. Of course, that takes more time, resources, money. Or you can do maybe a school or department level if you're just one or a couple of teachers that are, maybe a department, a math department, an English department that are trying to improve the craft at the department level. At the individual level, you can also apply it, and this is probably where it's utilized the most in solving problems to your own setting and to your own classroom to try to improve upon the practice of your classroom. Okay, this is the process really, and if you see that graph really, that graph is going to speak 1,000 words in terms of how action research goes. It's a continuous process. It never really ends. I mean, unless you want it to end, but you're always looking for continuous improvement. You begin by identifying, what the problem is or what the area is. You figure what data you need to collect, and you collect that data. It could be qualitative or quantitative data. It could be existing data that already exists that you might already have access to. It could be student essays or student homework or things of that student journals, things that you may already be collecting. Then you do data analysis and interpretation. Action planning, you provide a guide for how you're going to proceed with the inquiry, and it's really designed to provide provocative and constructive ways of thinking. So you reflect, plan, act, observe, and once again, the cycle begins again with reflecting, planning, acting, and observing. Okay, identifying an area of focus. This goes off of these sort of 4 processes. The first process here is identifying an area. To help you identify an area, if you don't have one, is what are you trying to learn? What are you trying to change? What are you trying to improve? And what can help you be a better practitioner? Again, this is really focused on practitioners, not researchers. And these would be 4 key questions that would help you in really identifying an area of focus if you didn't already have one. Okay, 2 and 3 is collecting, analyzing, and interpreting data. Really, this is data that you're going to need to collect. For the research, is going to really depend on the problem that you're trying to address. You got to have the problem before you figure what data you're going to collect. Data really is going to need to contribute to understanding and having a resolution to the problem. Qualitative data is really more appropriate because a lot of action research projects are generally small in many senses. If it's a classroom, it may be 30 students. If it's various classrooms, it may be as much as 120, 150 students. But not always. And quantitative data is going to be useful, particularly the use of descriptive statistics to really help you understand, look at trends across some of your data to be able to solve problems. And the planning part. Really, it comes down to sharing findings with others in formal and informal settings, having conversations, using it for professional development, and then write reports that are going to be read by a small or larger group of faculty to maybe help them improve your craft based on what you found. Writing might lead to further analysis, create deeper understanding, suggestions for how to act on the findings, and really ultimately create permanent records of how you're actually improving your everyday practice. So, thank you very much for listening to this lecture on action research. I look forward to your discussion, and I will see you all next week.